Good evening, everyone. My name is Celeste de la Cabra. Welcome back to my channel. So as promised last week, today is the inaugural episode of my brand new series, Cinema Sepulcher, the series where we look through my Blu-ray collection and rescue unwatched films to save them from rotting on the shelf like a fetid corpse in an unmarked grave. Okay, so today, as discussed last week, the first film we're going to be discussing is Akira Kurosawa's High and Low. This is the Criterion edition. It comes in at spine number 24, so this is a pretty early one actually. But I watched this a couple days ago, and so this will be my third Kurosawa film after Throne of Blood and Seven Samurai. Yeah, and I have been very impressed with both of those, but and I guess it's true for this one too. None of them so far have really felt like absolutely mind-blowingly incredible. They've just been really great instead, you know? I think I've given all of them an 8 out of 10, though I think I need to rewatch Throne of Blood at this point. But this one is very different from the other ones that I've seen and what Kurosawa is known for. It's nothing to do with like samurais or feudal Japan or anything like that. It's actually a fairly contemporary, and I would say very Hitchcockian sort of crime thriller, maybe bordering on film noir, but that would probably be up for debate. The basic premise of the film is that a super rich owner of a shoe company, or CEO of a shoe company in Japan, wants to prevent new people from coming into his company and turning it into cheap shit. Basically, he wants to remain a high-end shoe retailer, and he values his work, whereas these people just want to make a cheap profit. And right before he's about to set in motion a plan to keep the company, an unknown person calls him up and says that he's kidnapped his son and demands a ransom of, I think it was like 30 million yen, which translates to 200,000 American dollars. And in 1960, that's about $2 million in today's money. I think that's about all I'm going to tell you in terms of plot. Just so you know, I'm not planning to do spoilers on these. And if I do, I'll warn you and give you a timestamp. But I mainly want to give like general overview discussions of these, so people who haven't seen the films can watch them. So the film runs at about 2 hours and 20 minutes, and really none of that feels wasted. The whole thing is really tightly shot, tightly paced, beautifully directed, and brilliantly performed. The lead actor, Toshiro Mifune, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, was really astonishing in the lead performance. There's some great supplements on this disc too. There's part of the It Is Wonderful to Create series that was done on many of Kurosawa's films. I don't think all of them. But it's about a 37-minute TV special that really kind of in a rapid-fire style goes through the making of the film. And you really get to see just how much of a perfectionist Kurosawa was, to almost an unsettling and maybe counterproductive degree. But I mean, he produced many of the best films ever made. That's part of where he continues to remind me of Hitchcock. The factoid in there that really stuck with me is when one of the crew members told about how, okay, so there's a shot where the kidnapper is across a bridge, or is on a bridge across from a bunch of sewage, essentially. And Kurosawa didn't like the look of the garbage in the sewer. And they had to go get a permit to actually put bamboo and shit in the sewer. Bamboo in the sewer so that he could be satisfied with the shot. There's a very elaborate train sequence that was shot in 1 or 2 takes. And they had 8 cameras set up across the train. And actually one of them wasn't working, and they had to redo some of the shots. There really seemed to be a consistent feeling of high tension and stress on set. A lot of people almost quit, but I guess it's the style that he worked with, and it worked for him pretty good. In terms of themes, the film really dives deep into class struggle and criminal justice in Japan. After watching the special features, I learned that part of Kurosawa's explicit intent or inspiration for making the film was that he felt that kidnapping laws in Japan were too lax. And in fact, the film was used as evidence when new laws were proposed to make the kidnapping guidelines harsher. Sometimes it feels to me a little bit like The CEO character is lionized a little too much. He's like the perfect, ideal, quote unquote, good capitalist. But at the same time, his house is literally on a hill overlooking what is essentially a slum. Like, he's literally the house on the hill. And it really just kind of smacks you in the face with its visual metaphor of the difference between the rich and the poor. Again, it's hard to dive into this without spoiling the film, so I won't, but class struggle is a really big theme in the film. And the last thing I want to say about the film is that the final sequence is what really sold me on the film. There is a really gut-punching performance in that scene, and the writing and the implications of it are pretty heartbreaking and really kind of leave you mouth agape, gutted at the end of the film. So I don't know, if it's a slow watch for you, maybe stick it out to the end. The next film I wanted to discuss, something a little completely different, is the Scream Factory edition of the OMEN III, The Final Conflict. So this one stars Sam Neill as Damien. Maybe skip ahead a little bit if you haven't seen any of the Omen films, because they build off of each other, and to even give you the basic premise of this one reveals certain things about the first two. So I'll try to put a timestamp right here, but go ahead and skip ahead if you haven't seen any of the Omen films. In any case, so Damien is all grown up now, and he's actually a very powerful CEO of Thorn Industries, and he becomes a political figure in the process. There's a bunch of like pseudo-theological mumbo-jumbo about a second coming of Christ that's going to align with the death of the Antichrist, and there's some questionable astronomy that goes into it. The whole thing is very silly, but it actually is fairly entertaining for, I'd say, 95% of it. Sam Neill's performance is just pretty amazing. It's actually pretty astonishing to watch this and remember that this guy was in Jurassic Park. There's this incredible sequence where he's in a room alone with a life-size crucifix of Jesus, except he's crucified backwards. It's a little hard to describe. Actually, here. It's shown a little bit on the back here, but the inside art shows it. That was a really visually striking scene, but the monologue that he gives, it's like straight out of Paradise Lost. Like him, not quite as the devil, but, you know, speaking for the devil, just laying into Christ and God. And I can't believe I haven't heard this monologue as like an extended sample on several black metal albums. It's like goosebumps. It's so good. Now, I guess my main issue with the film is the ending. So now I guess I'm definitely going to have to ask you to skip ahead if you haven't seen the Omen 3. But this goes from a pretty effective, if a little silly, very dark satanic horror film into God's Not Dead tier Christian filmmaking. I guess I'll keep trying to keep it a little vague, but basically there's like a scene at the very end of the film, like Jesus appears in lights, or I guess maybe the rebirth of Jesus appears in lights, and the characters are just like praying at his feet, and then there's like several Bible verses that appear on screen before the end crawl credits. It's just like, I don't know, something that I really liked about the first two Omen films is that they were bold enough to end it like evil prevails. Now I think this works on two levels. If you're interpreting good and evil straightforwardly, as I think it's presented in the films, then it works as a really good allegory for political corruption and for the downfall of humanity. And that is pretty bleak. It's a pretty dark premise to follow through to its conclusion and just say, yeah, we're like completely fucked, and the evidence can be right in front of our eyes and we still let it happen. That's, I think, the more traditional and probably more well-backed reading of the films, but there's also the reading that you could take if you're like a weird quasi-Satanist goth like me, and you can kind of see him as the hero going against oppression, because that's kind of the foundation of Satanism, is to look at the Abrahamic God, the Christian God, as a figure of oppression, and Satan as a figure of freedom. And like literally his name is the light bearer, the bringer of light, the bringer of knowledge, the bringer of freedom. So that's another way to look at it, is it's like a triumphant hero's tale of rebellion against corruption. Anyway, it just goes to show you that either way you want to look at it, it's thematically consistent as he survives at the end of each film. Now, after watching the special features, it's unclear to me if this was just something that organically was put in the script, or if there was some studio pressure to be like, look, this is kind of like the conclusion of this arc. You can't have Satan win. We can't be out here as 20th Century Fox just like pro-Satanism, you know? You gotta Jesus it up at the end a bit. But either way, I think it's lame. So, I don't know. I enjoyed the film. I just think it kind of falls apart at the end. Okay, and then finally, I wanted to talk about my Vinegar Syndrome edition of New York Ninja. Now, if you don't know anything about this film, this is one of the rare, and maybe the only instance that I've personally seen of a lost film actually being discovered and finally being put out for everyone to see. However, it goes further than that. I don't know that you can spoil this film, so I would say you're good to go ahead and watch it. Watch this segment, regardless of if you've seen it, but I guess end the video now if you haven't seen it and you really, really want to go in completely blind. Basically, the idea behind this release was that 20th Century Fox, I believe was the studio, didn't finish financing this film because they went bankrupt, and so the project was abandoned, the film reels were put in a vault, the sound elements were lost, and that was it. This was in 1984. So like 35 years, I think, later, the elements were found and nobody wanted them, but Vinegar Syndrome was like, sure, we'll hang on to those. We'll see. We'll maybe put that in our back pocket. And then the, I guess, co-director, this is such a unique situation that traditional film language starts to get a little tricky as to whether or not it applies. But the newest director of the film decided to take this on as a project, finish the film, restore it, and put it out so we could all finally see it. Now, since the sound elements were completely lost, and there was no script, and there was no credits, he basically had to guess the dialogue, guess the plot, and guess the order in which the scenes were supposed to go. So what they did, which I think is kind of cool, is they found a lot of like Vinegar Syndrome favorites that have been in other films in their catalog and hired them to do the voice acting. And Dude Man actually wrote his own script for it based on the visual elements that were left. And they actually didn't shoot any new footage. They used only existing footage. So let's talk about the end product, I guess. It is definitely an entertaining kind of midnight movie popcorn film to watch with friends. There's an introduction at the beginning where the director says, look, you want to get some friends over, you want to order pizza, beer, soda, whatever you like, and you want to have a good time. Now, I watched this by myself, so I didn't get the like kind of communal riffing experience that I think is kind of integral to this. But I mean, let's be honest, it's not that good. It's fun, it's okay, it has things going for it, but the audio commentary, which I did listen to after watching it, is actually, I think, better than the film. It's certainly more interesting. But I don't know, there's something about the whole mythology behind this. And the main guy who plays the ninja, his name was John Liu. And that's his character in the film too, in case that was confusing for anyone else. But he is actually extremely talented. He was a real actor and a real filmmaker. This was just something that didn't pan out for him, and I guess he didn't have much in the way of budget in the first place. And I loved seeing the vintage 1980s New York City photography. There was a lot about this to like, but okay, even though they did their best with the dubbing and the new dialogue, a lot of the times I don't think it works. I kind of like when it doesn't match the mouth, because it kind of gives you that martial arts terrible dubbing feel, but I just didn't think a lot of the voice actors were that good, to be honest. And the choreography is pretty rough. Like John Liu's choreography, his physical acting, his martial arts is amazing. But it only works if everyone else can do it too, you know? It's like, I don't know, martial arts is a collaborative thing. And the people he got to go with this were, I mean, it was pretty rough. So I guess I'll just say I love New York Ninja. But yeah, I mean, if you get a chance to see it, definitely if you get a chance to see it screened in a theater, I think that would be a blast. I guess I would just not recommend that you put it on by yourself and judge it like you would literally any other film, because it's not like any other film that I've ever seen or I think even exists. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep it after I watched it the first time, but after going through the special features and kind of thinking about it, I think it is just kind of an amazing relic or an amazing piece of cinema history that exists. And I actually do really like the special features on it. There's a documentary on it that's really good. The audio commentary is really good. And you know what? One of these days I'll have some friends over, we'll throw it on, and we'll probably have a lot more fun with it than I did by myself. Okay, so that's it. That was the first episode of Cinema Sepulcher. I really hope you enjoyed this, because it gives me a chance to go through all these films that I've bought and just have gone by the wayside and I didn't have a chance to watch yet. And yeah, it's good for me to actually watch this stuff and then get to talk about it with you all. If you all have seen any of these films, I would absolutely love for you to leave me some comments so we could have a discussion about them. And if you enjoyed this and you want to watch along for next time, next Friday we will be discussing Akira Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress, Aribato from Altered Innocence, and Nightmare Weekend from Vinegar Syndrome. So that's the homework if you want to be completely caught up and you want to watch along with me. If not, like I said, I try to keep these spoiler free so you can join me regardless. But that's what to expect for next week. Until then, I love you all very much, and I hope that your day ends better than it started.